and all those who worked hard over the last several days to mitigate in the face of some real devastation. And I just want to say that, our administration will do everything that we can to make sure that we are assisting our communities, assisting residents who are dealing with varying degrees of loss right now. I'm joined today by our MEMA director, Don Brantley, whose teams have been coordinating with local officials as well. And I'm delighted to be joined here today and hearing directly from our colleagues in government, Senator Mark, Representative Sabadosa, Mayor Sierra, Chief Wicklund, Chief Connell. We have our DPW commissioner director from Northampton as well. Folks from EMS, Kristen Aleko, who runs our administration's Western Mass office. Kristen, as well as our rural director, Ann Goby, have been in touch and will continue to be involved. Our Commissioner of Agriculture, Ashley Randall, will be out here this afternoon because we know that farms have been particularly devastated and we're really concerned about rural economy. So she will be out here this afternoon as well. But know that we will continue to do whatever we can to assist our residents and our communities, and I wanted to express deep gratitude to all who've worked assisting with rescues and assisting in helping to mitigate what has been a really trying and difficult several days here for folks.
Governor Healey, I know you took a helicopter ride in. Did you get an aerial view of some of the damage? What were you able to see while you were up there?
Yeah, I sure did. I mean, when you look at the Connecticut, for example, and just how brown it is. I mean, you see the sediment, and just you can see what's happened in terms of erosion and what that has done. You can see the flooding that's still, and I know we've had a couple days where waters have receded, but they're still very high, and so it gives you a very good sense of what was actually here and what people are still dealing with. I also was able to observe so many of the fields, and that's why I spoke of the farming earlier, because our farming economy, our rural, and agriculture economy is so important to this area. It is important to Massachusetts. It's important to our administration, which is why we appointed the first ever rural director. And so to be able to see fields just still covered, people are suffering and will suffer, total wipeouts this year, and we've got to find a way to help the people. So it was very informative to be able to come in and observe that from that perspective.
I know you said Massachusetts is going to do whatever it can to try and help some of these communities. What does that help look like, and what's that process entail moving forward from here?
Well, I can let others speak to that, particularly Don Brantley, but know that it's probably going to take a variety of forms. In the first instance, it's figuring out what resources are needed, how can the state assist and plug in with that. It now moves to a different phase in some respects in terms of mitigation. We talked about funding. We talked about funding in particular because we know, at the end of the day, that's what communities and residents, business owners are going to need. Obviously, there are certain state formulas, certain federal formulas. That's all stuff that we've got to work through. But the point is, this is all about teamwork, and my job as governor is to make sure that we are maximizing everything we can for the sake of our residents and our communities.
Is FEMA being brought to bear?
And federal funding. I mean, obviously these communities have, snow budgets, if you will, snow removal budgets, but they don't have things for flooding and, sort of unforeseen damage.
No, and I'm mindful of that. Look, I grew up in a town of about maybe 1,500 people, so I have some understanding of the constraints, on some of our smaller towns and also cities, and so we're mindful of that, Beth, and I think we've got to have some conversations about what exists right now and what exists in terms of the funding formulas. And as I say, as governor, I will do everything that I can to make sure that we're getting resources to the communities who need them.
Governor, President Biden has already sort of reached out to Vermont, which is hit quite hard.
Yeah.
Have you heard from any federal agency? Have you heard from?
I have not. I don't know, Don, have you heard? I don't think we've heard definitively.
No, ma'am.
Yeah. Obviously, the situation in Vermont is real catastrophic in certain instances, and I mean, I know the governor there has talked about the specter of that being far greater than Irene, and so we our hearts go out to the folks in Vermont right now. we've said we're ready to assist and provide help there. I know they are getting much needed federal help. We find ourselves in a somewhat different situation, fortunately, though we also recognize that for some here, people are really hurt, really hurt, and we want to make sure that we're doing all we can for those folks.
So the assessment you're going to spend, or your agencies will spend the next few days assessing the damage on farm.
Exactly. So we'll have more information about that in the days to come.
Governor, where are you in terms of trying to get state funding possibly in Western Mass, and is a request for federal aid on the table as well?
Well, I'm not going to foreclose anything. In terms of the current state of things, we continue to have discussions with our local officials and also MEMA about what needs to happen here, and those discussions are ongoing. And as I say, we want to do whatever we can to make sure that we're assisting our communities.
And what do you say to those residents all across Western Mass who are going through any kind of damage or flood situation right now?
That I am so sorry. I am so sorry for the problems, the pain that people are experiencing, and some, have experienced real, true devastation in terms of loss of crops, loss of livelihood, potential loss of jobs. With all of that, as we're going to have to rebuild and recover, things are very expensive. If you get a flooded basement and you have damage to your property, I mean, these are thousands and thousands of dollars, right? And people don't have that. And so I just want people to know the reason I am here and that my team is here and the team has been on the ground since this started. And shortly I'm going to go up to North Adams, which, as you know, that region has experienced also some real devastation, is because, our job in government is to make sure that we hear people, we see people, and that we communicate about ways to get after it and fix things. And people are going to need help with various kinds of mitigation as we go forward. And so, that's my message to the public.
Last question.
Governor, this damage happening not just in Western Mass, but in kind of far afield Western Mass, what are some extra challenges in responding to damage like this in this region of the state?
Well, I think I can let the folks on the ground who know and live it day in and day out speak to that. But I think, part of it is infrastructure, and part of it is just, wiping out one road. I mean, it's not like, Boston, where there are a lot of different routes to places. So, what happens when you've got a fire station that's literally situated and almost cut off, right, from regular means of access? And what does that mean for public health? What does it mean for public safety? And these are some of the things that these folks have worked very hard to try to overcome and deal with. So, those are unique challenges. I think just the size and the scale of the workforce and those, able to assist. And I think generally speaking, when you think about people who, at the margins, I think about our farmers, many of them experienced a lot of hardship coming into this season. And now, to have this happen is just an extra weight and an extra challenge. I also, though, want to make sure we hear from our local officials as well, if anybody wishes to say anything.
No, go ahead. No, you had a question for someone that actually
matters.
matters.
Talk about some of the biggest challenges for your community.
I'll let Carol do the talk.
So, some of the challenges that we faced was this incident happened very, very quickly. So we have a small town, a small fire department, and the resources that we needed, we had to bring in from the outside. And even to bring people in with flooded roads and bridges that were out was a little bit of a challenge. So it took a little time to get everything here because of how fast the incident happened.
Did you have trouble getting to some folks?
We did. We had a few houses that were cut off by water. We had a couple of our mutual aid departments come in to assist us, including area towns and also the regional technical rescue team. And they helped us access these people and make sure that houses were clear, that there was nobody that was still trapped.
And with those bridges closed, you have a road, but it's going to take you a little longer to get around and respond.
Yes, and so the amount of resources that we brought in so quickly also congested the areas that we were operating to.
Can you also speak to cell service? And there's a limit, there's a lack out here, there's broadband issues needed. Can you talk to your needs?
Yes, there was some communication issues. One of the areas that was affected, there's very little cell service as well as very little radio service. So we had to set up some procedures to get radio communications and cell communications out of that area that was affected.
Deputy Chief Springman, I'm not sure if you're a lifelong Western Mass resident, but I was curious perspective-wise, have you seen anything of this magnitude here before?
So we've been through quite a few storms, and even some of the residents that I spoke with yesterday commented that they're familiar with some flooding, but it seems like this flood came faster and harder than ever before. So it seems the storms, as they come, are coming more often and are harder to navigate.
And how are the people, I know some people have been displaced from their homes, any indication how they're holding up or what's being done to try and help them when they have no place to go that's their home right now?
And I can only talk to our town. I spoke with a lot of the residents that were affected yesterday, and most everybody is going to be able to go back to their home. They're just doing a lot of cleanup.
What's the financial challenge for you, and what are you going to need from the state?
At this point, I really don't know. We don't have a lot of information in yet about cost at all. I think that's going to take some time to figure out.
Anyone else have anything to add?
Hey, good morning. The damage assessment process is underway. MEMA held a coordination call yesterday afternoon with all of the Western Mass communities, with their emergency management officials who are doing a phenomenal job, and it's our privilege to support and assist them any way we can. That damage assessment process will help us understand the scope and the scale of the event and the financial impact that it's had, and then from there we can begin the process to determine what assistance may or may not be available.
How long does that assessment process take when you have so many different cities and towns to get involved in?
So each local community leads their own initial damage assessment, and MEMA provides support and some tools to do that. So depending on the size and the scale of the event, it could take a few days to a couple of weeks. We expect this one to be done sometime next week, but no guaranteed date.
And then after an assessment, how long is the turnaround time before communities could start seeing any financial relief from the state?
That's really hard to say. So until we know what the damage amounts are, we really can't speak to that.
How many Western Mass communities have been impacted at this point? Is it a dozen, half dozen? How many communities have been impacted in Western Mass?
That's a good question. So we know of about 10 to 12 that declared local states of emergency. One had repealed it yesterday, Ashfield, and then 2 more will be repealing their state of emergency today. But a lot of communities had significant impacts without declaring states of emergency, so there were quite a few.
All right, thank you. We're going to go on to 100 Ashfield Road real quick to see the damage. Your media is welcome to join, but we'll only be a couple minutes.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Governor.
All right.
Thank you so much for everything.
Okay,
I am.